I'm excited for our next guest. He's super talented. He does a whole lot of things, and we're going to dive into each of those here in a little bit. I'm Jonathan Green, your host of Bar Conversations, and the guy we're about to talk to, his 6-song EP, A Good Place to Start, is out now. He's Nashville-based. He's a singer-songwriter, guitarist. I think there's probably a few more things I could add to the list because he's a very talented man. And let's welcome in Corey Congilio.
You nailed it, man. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it, and like I said beforehand, I wasn't going to jinx myself. I think I've started to do that. I've talked myself into screwing up names, and well, I mean, I always had a way with words, but then I started saying that, and then I keep screwing them up. So I'm like, I got this, and I'm
you had the confidence. Yeah, no worries. I've heard a lot. You can imagine.
I was gonna say, I mean, looking at it, I was like, I gotta ask, and then I hope I get it correct, But Corey, I'm glad you're here. We're gonna have fun talking about the new music you put out, everything you do. But this is Bar Conversation, so I got to start it off with, what's your go-to drink these days, or at least what are you drinking tonight?
Go-to drink, 99% of the time, is a tequila soda. I have a couple different tequilas I like, but I'm not super picky. Now, I will say I got cocky and I was like, I got a little Macallan 12 left. I'm going to be like this baller guest, right, with this, $100-some bottle of scotch. And I finished it. I thought I had some left and it was all gone. And then my wife said, well, there's some Miller High Lifes in the back of the fridge. And I was like, this is my old 20s beer, So I decided to pop one open. I had a couple left in there. So that's what I'm using tonight for my elixir.
Hey, the high life, living the high life. I like
champagne and beers, man.
now you mentioned tequila. Do you go straight Blanco, Reposado, Añejo? What do you dive down on that?
I do like a Reposado. Coralejo is one of my favorites. I could drink that. I can drink most tequilas just on the rocks and enjoy it, but I feel like the water kind of tempers it a little bit. And then if I have one, I feel, safe enough to act like a person. I don't drink as much as I used to. I did last week. I was in Chicago with some friends, and my wife tagged along for a guitar-related trip I was on, and we had some fun. I had a lot of Moscow Mules there because it was like 75, 80. It just felt right. It was so good.
Yeah, no, I've been enjoying the cooler temps. I'm in Kentucky, and thankfully, when we're talking, at least, who knows by the time when this drops, but we went from a super hot summer to a nice, cool, comfortable, I feel like, last couple of days.
Yeah,
so I'm excited about that, and I'm excited because, like you talked about the Moscow Mules, a little cooler out, maybe sit by the fire, sip on something. So
yeah,
got a
what do you got?
Little First West.
Ooh, I've never seen that.
So it's pretty new.
Okay.
Got a nice little bottle here. Even has
bottom
on
well
the
done.
top. Yeah,
that's super cool.
They went all out, and it's only like a $70 bottle, I think. So
not bad.
But yeah, so they on the other show that I get to do where I taste a lot more bourbon. We just had them on, and they use their popcorn corn that they use and put it into some bourbon for the first time, and it's pretty tasty.
I bet it is. I'll keep my eye out for that.
Yeah, like I said, it's a fun one. The first one we nosed, I was like, I smell popcorn. This is weird.
Wow, was that obvious?
At least on the first one. Now, the second one, it wasn't as obvious because they kind of did a little bit different things, but I was like, that's popcorn. Now, it didn't taste like popcorn, obviously.
Okay.
It tasted, it had more
but the aroma was there.
The aroma was there, and it was wild. So you just never know what you're going to get in these bottles these days.
I did a gig once at the Dickel Factory, and that was really fun because they kind of pride themselves on being a small business still, and it was good. We had a really good tasting little dinner there. That was fun.
I like that.
Yeah.
Now, in addition to you enjoying a drink occasionally, you have a love of music. Like I said, you're a singer-songwriter, guitarist, educator. Like I said, I can go down a list of your talents. What sparked your love for music? Where did all that come from?
That's a great question. There was always music on in my house, and I always like to say I don't want to paint this picture that it was like the Partridge Family, but there was a lot of music in the house. There was a lot of Motown. There was a lot of Southern rock. There was some country, and I came from the Northeast, New Jersey, Pennsylvania border. So we were kind of in a weird area without an identity. Like we weren't South enough to be like bluegrass lovers, or we weren't, in New Orleans, or we weren't, Hispanic folks that, had an influence with music. It was definitely a melting pot in my house. And I knew I wanted to play an instrument at a young age, but I didn't know what it was going to be. Started with saxophone. And then my father had 3 other brothers that all played guitar or bass. And again, not the Partridge Family. It was that they might have got together twice a year at most, mostly once, if that. And I kind of got the bug there. I thought, I think I can do this. And as I realized early on, like, I'm not growing anymore. I don't think I'm going to be an athlete. And I remember my freshman year of high school, I tried out for like the freshman basketball team, and I didn't even check to see if I made the team because I wasn't going to go if I made it or if I didn't. I didn't. But I mean, I wore like a Gibson guitar t-shirt with like the sleeves ripped off. Like I didn't give a shit. But I knew, I was like, well, let me try it one time. And I just didn't really care. But so the identity started to happen with music. And I think for people around 13, some earlier, some older, you're looking for something that you can attach yourself to. And the guitar was it for sure.
Now, like all good guitar players in high school and at a young age, did you form a rock band?
I did not. Yeah, it was a
surprise.
I know. Well, I came from an area where there weren't a lot of guitar players or musicians, and I wish I had that experience. I had a couple little things here and there happen, but when I was a freshman, I ended up befriending some older upperclassmen, and they had, now hold on to your hats, the ladies were flocking here because we played what affectionately was called oldies. Mm-hmm. But they were smart because they knew if they played oldies, quote unquote, they would get gigs. So we played church picnics and we played little, events that for a high school kid was great. And I was the youngest, and I remember the band leader who played keyboards and guitar. He said, well, I play guitar. And I was like, well, you probably don't play guitar like I do. And he was like, yeah, you're right, you can join. So I was the youngest guy in the band, and started to bring kind of more of the rock stuff into it. But it was a really, really great learning experience because we had guitar, bass, drums, sax, and we weren't just a 3-piece rock band. Now, I eventually had some of those in school, but it wasn't like we were playing a bunch of gigs or anything. We were doing like talent shows occasionally, or things like that. But yeah, so it wasn't like this, Fast Times at Ridgemont High kind of a thing. I wasn't pulling up in my Fiero and jumping out with my pointy guitar and all the ladies swooned. It was far from that, let me tell you.
Hey, if you wanted to, you could have, though. Right.
Yeah, I had a wood grain Plymouth Reliant K wagon, and that I paid $500 for. So, but yeah, I think I drove a couple girls home in that.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I love that. Like you said, you gravitated toward the guitar, but you also played, sax. I mean, do you still play other instruments still to this day, and kind of dabble, or has the guitar kind of just been home?
Well, I started to dabble in other instruments before I moved to Nashville because I said, hey, that's what's going to get me the gigs, right? So I started playing mandolin a little bit, and then, I played bass a little bit here and there, but I started to realize that it was all making me kind of a worse guitar player because I wasn't focusing on just trying to be a better guitar player. But in recent years, within the past year, I just am enamored with keys, and I bought a refurbed old Wurlitzer from a great keyboard friend of mine, and I haven't been practicing as much lately, but there's a time when I go like really hard and I start getting better and better, and I've gotten way better from the time I purchased it till now. And I also love using it when I do teach as a teaching tool, but I just think keyboards are like any keyed instrument, piano, Whirly, Hammond, Rhodes, synths. I'm enamored by all of it. And I recently saw a concert with like a club show with 3 amazing keyboard players and a drummer, and that was it. One guy played Moog bass, the other guy played Whirly, the other guy played organ, and then they switched up a little bit. And it was incredible, and I was like, these guys are having more fun than any guitar player I know.
I was going to say that sounds pretty awesome and pretty.
It was
unique,
really
I don't
cool.
feel like that's something that you would see every day.
No, not at all. It was awesome. It was I give him props because it was the great Lockie Doley on Hammond and his clavinet that has the whammy bar in it. You might have seen him on social media, and it's the best version of Voodoo Child since Jimi Hendrix I've ever heard. And my friend Ty Bailey played keys, and then Kevin Gastangwe, who plays with Corey Wong on synth and Moog and stuff. But they all switched a little bit, and it was really, really cool.
See, that sounds like a fun show, because it's, like I said, something you don't see now.
Totally. Yeah.
Now, I know you talk about the guitar, you know, the rock, but you also, I think, have a love of the blues. There's some blues at the heart of your work. So did you grow up on the blues too at some point, or when did the blues enter your life and kind of make an impact?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's kind of where I got started. I mean, I probably got started on all things rock, but once I discovered my dad's Stevie Ray Vaughan, you know, Texas Flood cassette on his dresser, I took that and I was like, okay, what is this? Like, this is blowing my mind. And then I started diving in hardcore, which a lot of people in my age group did. And that, of course, leads you to Hendrix if you weren't at Hendrix first. But then also, what I would always read in magazines is you got to go back to listen to what they listen to. So for, you know, Stevie Ray Vaughan, it's, of course, like Albert King and Otis Rush, and, you know, the list goes on. And, of course, his brother, Jimmy. So it started from there, and then I started listening to some, just all types of blues. Robert Cray, of course, the classic bluesmen, B.B. King, Albert King, Freddie King, you know, Albert Collins, I'm a huge fan of. You name it. Like, I dug it all. And it was the easiest thing for me to pick up and start playing with other musicians. So I was sitting in with adults when I was a teenager. And that really, you know, lit the fire. The spark was already there, but then that definitely got bigger.
Well, and then obviously, you know, now you're doing this as a career. When did that spark turn into a fire, turn into like, oh, this is something I could actually like maybe make a living off of?
Well, I remember in an English class when I was 13, I had we had to like start learning how to write a resume, even at that young. And I had it all written where I had gone to Berkeley and I had these, you know, accreditations and stuff. So I knew like I was going to be a career musician. Now, I did not go to Berkeley. I didn't go to any music school. But it was pretty early on. And for me, I would say that if you said, hey, you're going to be in a wedding band, I'd have been like, hell yeah, that'd be awesome. Because the only influence around me were like, you know, my mom knew a teacher or somebody, you know, her brother's in a band and they were a wedding band, or like a club rock band that like never went anywhere or something. And I was like, that's the epitome. Like, I didn't know how to go about reaching anybody on a bigger level. And in some days I still don't. And you know, I have a great life as it is, but your location can determine a lot. And being that I did grow up in this sort of no man's land, it wasn't New York, LA, Florida, New Orleans, Nashville, even Kentucky, like, you know, where music is more of a cultural way of life. It was not so much where I was. So I felt like I've always been a little behind the eight ball and a late bloomer when it comes to career, you know, music stuff.
Hey, but you're finding your way and doing some fun things along the way. And
no, for sure. I've had a lot of great experiences, and I continue to.
Well, and I was going to say, I mean, now that you're looking back at that, I mean, or maybe you get a chance to occasionally get asked this question, but I mean, I think you've been playing professionally for a couple decades now. Is that right? Like,
about
I mean,
3.
Is that,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it? I mean, what's it been like to be, you know, whether it was a touring guitarist, a session musician, you know, working in this, whatever it was, you know, filling in for someone on a stage in Nashville just to have some good times. What's it been like on that journey now that, you know, you're slowly finding that way? Yeah,
I decided early on that as long as I was working with a guitar in my hand, then I was having forward momentum at that point. And when it felt like it was kind of petering out, I wanted to go on to something else. But I also, you know, I also didn't want to be a starving artist, so I figured out ways to find gigs that paid better, not just your corporate gigs, but by teaching and by working with instrument manufacturers to be, their demo artist or a clinician or something like that, where they have, you'll make 2-3 times on one of those gigs what you'll do on like a normal, performance, because musicians aren't familiar with the corporate world and how much money people really have. So when you're getting, $750 for an event as opposed to $150, you're like, oh man, I got to keep doing this. So I was trying to expand as much as possible to make a living.
Well, and like you said, you've been doing that by doing some of the guitar lessons and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, since I think 2010, you've authored over 30 instructional guitar courses. You got workingclassguitar.com, YouTube.
Yep.
You host them weekly lessons, gear reviews. How has your role kind of in that lane grown, and letting other people build up their skills? How does all that play in with everything you do? Because I'm guessing you enjoy that as well.
It's a really fun sort of, dare I say, 9 to 5 component of being a musician, because there's a lot to take in with all of that stuff. I got hired to do some demonstrations for a company called Fishman many years ago, and they said, hey, we want to start doing video. And this was like 2007. So it wasn't commonplace to go on YouTube and see like guitar demos, but this was very fresh. And they said, we want you to be the guy for that. And I was like, okay. And they said, we're going to do it in Florida in this place called True Fire, where they actually have the ability to sort of track the analytics of the videos. Again, very, very early in, they didn't even know how to put a video on their website. Like, they needed help from True Fire. And then when I got to True Fire, I noticed all these like guitar player photos around, and I was like, what is it you guys do here? They're like, well, we don't really do what you're doing. We do online guitar lessons. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. They said, do you teach? And I was like, yeah, I teach like 60 students a week, in a 4x6 closet in a music store. And they said, well, we should talk about having you work for us one day. And I said, great, I'd love to do something. And it took a few years for that to materialize. And then ultimately I did my first course with them. It was really, really successful. A lot of people liked it. And I was kind of building this like a mini lesson fan base, in addition to honing my chops in front of a camera and how to present and how to speak and all that kind of stuff, because you have to cast a wide net. Everybody learns differently. Everybody's level is different, or physically, mentally, whatever. How everybody gathers information differently, and then applies it differently. So you have to kind of speak to large groups of people, and that was a good, sort of proving ground for me. And then I moved to Nashville, and I said, I think I'm a great sideman. I can get the sounds. I can sing the parts. I can play the parts. And I went into that really hard, and it was a lot of playing with, and no disrespect, but like C+, B-, B level acts for a long time, which were, some had deals, some lost a deal, some were trying to get a deal, some were on the cusp of it. And I did end up getting to play with some respectable, named acts that I learned a lot from. But the touring is so up and down, there's really no like financial stability when it comes to that. You throw in, recording session work in there, flying out to do clinics. So my calendar was always full for the most part, but it was like there was nothing that felt solid from a foundational, perspective. And then come late 2019, I'm on a flatbed truck playing a country gig, and it wasn't that I didn't like the gig. I just didn't want to be out there doing that right at that moment. I felt like I'd hit the ceiling, and I was like, I want to go home and make videos, and I want to teach lessons, and I want to start kind of building my own brand. And I started doing that in late 2019. Wouldn't you know it? Lots of stuff happens in 2020, particularly a global pandemic, and I was in the right place at the right time, because I'm live streaming every week, I'm teaching on Zoom, and I'm starting to develop a presence online as an online guitar personality, whatever. I don't even know what to call us, and I don't even care, because I think every musician should have a push for some sort of online brand, because now, there's a lot of reasons which we could go into or not, but those who are listening will get it. It's just part of what you do. It's another arm of your ability, hopefully. So I leaned into that really hard, and I said, I want to build my YouTube channel, and I want to create a company to where I can do my own online lessons. And now in 2025, I have that, and it's helped me to finance recording projects, paying band members, and the occasional meal out with my wife. So that's kind of the long-winded. It could be a lot longer, but that's the journey.
Well, and like you said, it's letting you do some things, and it's letting you do you enjoy it clearly, and it's letting you do the other thing that you enjoy, and that's play music, and like you said, you've been able to play with folks, and I think you have had the chance to play with some higher level folks. I mean, Josh Stone, David Lee Murphy, things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, what's it like when you do get to do some of those things, whether it's in the studio or on stage, or even maybe a good friend where you took half of his band from him? If you know what I'm talking about, go look at his social media. It's a great interaction there with Will. But I mean, just being able to do stuff like that's got to be pretty cool too.
Yeah, and in full transparency, having a teaching company where I sell guitar courses allows me to not rely on the weekly gigs as much. I can kind of start to build my own thing. And then if I want to take a week off and go fill in with Will Hogue on the road, I can do that. And that was an absolute blast, to getting to play for a singer-songwriter. When I met him, I said, "You're one of the reasons I moved to Nashville." And he was like, "No, what are you talking about?" And it was like, "No, I used to listen to your records and be like, I'd love to play with a guy like that." And it allowed me to kind of put that suit on when I did that. Excuse me. And it was just super fun. I did it without any like, oh, what am I going to do for gigs when I get off the road? Or I wish the other guitar player couldn't make it so I could do more. I was like so happy just to do those gigs and say bon voyage. You guys have a great rest of your tour, and have a blast with your regular guitar player, because he does the job as well as anybody too. So, but yeah, like getting to be in the studio with Joss Stone and doing some live streams with her, which was really fun. And, a legend like David Lee Murphy. So it's like, yeah, R&B singer, 90s country star, Americana singer-songwriter. One of my dear friends, Lucy Silvis, I get to play with her when she plays, and she's just incredible. And she's given me a lot of great opportunities, and, we become friends, and she knows that she can count on me when we're on stage together, and it's a nice friendship beyond the music. So it's nice to get those as you as you go through this kind of creative life.
Well, and I also just to harken back to the video with Will.
Yeah,
I enjoyed you had to. I'm like you. You got to double check with the wife, and every now and then they say yes, and you're able to do some fun things.
No, well, the thing that's missing from that video, because I didn't want to spoil it for. I mean, you don't know who's watching your videos, but Will's main guitar player, he couldn't do the first run of shows because it was his wife's 40th birthday, and he had a surprise party planned. So then Will asked another guy, and that guy showed up to his house like a week before he called me, and he said, "Man, I'm getting a divorce. I can't go on the road." So it was all this sort of like marital stuff involved. And then when he got to me, I was like, you got to wait. I had to ask my wife, because I was in Florida playing a show with my band, who was all ex-members of his band, bass, drums, and guitar. So it was really funny when he texted my drummer. We were all together, and he was like, "Oh my God, this is my old band you got." And I didn't know that or seek that out. It just happen to work out that way. Nashville's a small town, and I said, "Hey, I'm leaving tomorrow. Let me get back to you and confirm these dates." I.e., my wife picks me up. "Hey, by the way, Will Hogue is asking me to play 4 shows with them in 2 weeks." She's like, my wife's amazing, and she was like, "That sounds so fun. Oh my gosh." And I was like, "Yeah, all right, I guess I'm doing it," But yeah, she's never going to decline something, because she knows if I want to do it, it's going to be beneficial for me and for our family. So.
Well, and something else that you've done recently is put out a 6-song EP, a good place
That's right.
to start. What made you want to do the solo project and put out some music?
Well, I started toying around with it once I started to build the online community because people will reach out to me on several times a month, and they'll say, "Where can we see you play? Where can we see you play?" And this has happened in the past, and they'll come and they'll see me with an artist, and they'll say, "That was really good, but it wasn't like what you really do." Now, what they mean that nicely, but it means they haven't seen a bigger version of what they see online. So I said, I'm kind of like out of artists to play with here. Like, I don't want to play modern country. I've kind of run that track kind of to the end. I don't really like the music as much as I did earlier on. And I've seen behind the curtain of the Nashville music industry too much. That has made me kind of go like, I'm just going to start doing something on my own. So I wanted to start writing songs and putting a band together. And I decided to, since a lot of my, followers like traditional blues, they like fiery guitar playing, I was like, I'm going to do sort of a wink and a nod to the way a lot of bluesmen and jazz musicians put out records, where they put records out and they didn't write any of the songs. It's their interpretation. And this is, Willie Dixon has probably written 75% of all classic blues songs. And, if you look on any blues record, the artist probably didn't write 2/3 or more of them. So I was like, I want to do that just kind of as a tribute to them, as of my first, here's my new project. Check this out. This is kind of the direction I'm headed. So none of the songs sound like where they were written. They're all through my filter. And I wanted to see how that would land with people. And by and large, it's been pretty positive. So that's what I did. And I also, I had, since I had a small business, I was able to apply for one of those government loans they were giving out, in the pandemic days. And I was like, and my accountant's like, you could make this happen. So I was like, okay. I was like, all right, I had a little surplus of money and rented out Blackbird Studio here in Nashville, hired some great players, had a friend, Sean McDonald, help me produce it, and and we started down the track, and it was really fun. So that's kind of what a good place to start really is, and that's why I called it that, because it's kind of indeed a good place to start.
Well, and going a little further than that, like you said, it kind of shows that blues side, but you didn't just pick any blues song. You could have picked, ones that people have heard maybe,
of course,
on a lot of those records that you're talking about. You decided to maybe go a different route, some lesser-known songs made by, some really popular blues artists. Why'd you go that route, those hidden gems, and want to put your spin on them?
So I was just walking my dogs and just listening to playlists. And, I had my favorite songs, but I wanted to go a different direction. So I would just listen to obscure tracks off deep cuts off of old records. And I was like, oh man, that's a good one. I could do something with that. I could do something with that. Some of them are like from the early to mid 50s, early 60s. And I also said to myself, if I play these live, maybe people will actually think I wrote them. Not that I'm trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes, but it was a way I could present an original vision with someone else's tune. Now, and also, I'm in Nashville, and most country songwriters don't write their own songs either. They're in the room and they get credit so that the publisher is happy and that they can get a little piece of the pie as well. But there's plenty of songs out there that were written by people and performed by singers or performers, whatever you want to call them. Now, I'm writing my butt off these days, and I have a lot of stuff in the can that I can't wait to record. And I did put one original song out in February called She's Like the Weather, and I did that kind of to say, hey, this is what I do, dangle it in front of you, but check this out. This is also my sound. So yeah, that's kind of why I went that route. And again, the more obscure tunes just sounded fun, and I never heard anybody cover them, or very few at least.
Well, and I was going to say, like you said, you took a different approach. We could go song by song, but I'm going to pick just one in particular, Two-Headed Woman, Junior Wells.
Yep.
You kind of put the filters of maybe a little ZZ Top, a little Gary Moore,
Yeah.
get some more rock in there. How'd you kind of balance that with, the Willie Dixon's quintessential blues lyrics with maybe you trying to, do your thing with it?
Again, I was just kind of walking around listening to these tracks, and then I would get it and I'd turn the track off, and then I'd start kind of like envisioning something different. And I remember the opening riff I sang into my voice recorder, and came home, grabbed a guitar, started working it out. And it actually is, as I look back and we talk about this, it's kind of, it was very organic. Like, it wasn't like I said, okay, these are the songs I'm going to pick and I'm going to do them this way. I let them come like as if I was co-writing with the lyricist, essentially. And I think it's a really fun approach, just to take a song and put it on its head,
Well, yeah, I mean, the album's fantastic. It's a fun journey. And you also put out a music video for Two-Headed Woman, which features your 1964 Gibson SG Junior.
That's right.
I got to ask, I mean, do you have, I asked earlier what's your favorite drink or go-to. I guess I could ask this for you. What's your favorite guitar? What's your go-to guitar? And how do you kind of, choose what you want to do and feature and use in recordings?
This, the song kind of dictates it, the sound. I know with that particular guitar, it is like, it's one of my favorite recording guitars because it's just this powerful kind of rock sound out of this instrument. And it also kind of can double as like a more beefed up Telecaster. So I like that instrument a lot. Live, I'm playing a Collings I-35 LC Vintage. I love semi-hollow guitars like Gibson ES-335s, which I also have. But the Collings has been sort of like my stage guitar. It's a do-all thing. But in the recording process, it's really fun because you can kind of try on some different outfits and see what works best for the tune. And that one was just the gnarliest sounding one, So yeah, it was a perfect fit for that tune.
Well, and you talk about, I'm guessing as a guitarist that teaches guitar and loves guitar, I'm guessing you have one or two guitars at home.
If you look back, I'll go over my my left shoulder. There's a whole rack of them back there. Yeah, and it's I also as a working musician, I still buy and sell. Like, okay, it's time for that one to go. That one needs to go to somebody that's going to play it. And I move on and I get something new, and that scratches the itch for a while. And sometimes they stay long, and sometimes they don't.
Well, and for you as you kind of go down the journey of creating your sound, or showcasing what you hope your sound to be, when it comes to like the blues music, and that's kind of I know where your heart's at. How do you kind of balance the quote unquote history of blues with obviously things have changed. We're a few years past when a lot of the early blues songs were recorded. So maybe bring it into the modern world, but still embrace that past.
That's sort of the. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was gonna say, and kind of do that balance.
That's sort of the mission. It's a weird world that we live in now. I watch it, and through social media, which I don't even think it's social media anymore. I think it's like entertainment media in your hand, because nobody really sees what their friends are doing anyway these days because of the algorithms or whatever. But I see a lot of people. It's funny. It's going to be so hypocritical because I put a cover record out. But I see a lot of people sort of playing music that sounds like something they've already heard before, or playing versions exactly of something else. And I wanted to almost kind of jab at that, but also take it in my own direction. I think one of the issues with blues is that, and I've been hearing this since I was 19. I heard a bass player, the first blues band I was ever in, 18, 19 years old. He said people treat blues like it's up on a mantelpiece, and then they bring it down, they polish it off, and then they put it back. And I was like, why? Why does it have to be that way? Hendrix didn't do that. Was Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters like trying to sound like Robert Johnson? No, they were trying to move the music along. And then you take it into whether it's Clapton and Mayall and the British blues players, and then you take Mike Bloomfield and people like that, and Paul Butterfield, like they were taking it somewhere else. A little bit of psychedelic stuff kind of came into play. Zeppelin was doing that with blues music. Yeah, it's about, to me, an evolution. I hear a lot of blues that sounds like what I call tribute music now. And it just sounds, the tones, the songs, like I said to myself, I'm going to cover these songs, because if I try to write songs that sound like I'm some downtrodden old guy, nobody's going to believe me, because I'm not. I'm like a skinny white dude that lives in Nashville and, teaches guitar lessons on the internet. I'm not, someone, I don't really have like the blues in the way that Howlin' Wolf did, or someone of that era, that category. So it would be wrong for me to try to say I'm a blues man, and I'm not. That's why I love, like, Robin Ford is one of my heroes, because Robin Ford's music embodies the blues, but he's a songwriter. And I was like, well, I really love songwriters, hence like the Will Hogues of the world. And, I'm a huge fan of Butch Walker, and Butch has become a friend, and that guy can write a song like in probably 30 seconds. Like, it's crazy. So a lot of the stuff I'm writing has all this influence from rock, from country, from Americana. And I'm actually like not hating it, which for a musician and a songwriter is a good thing to say.
I was gonna say I've talked to a few songwriters, and they're like, I don't like half of my stuff. I still feel like I got to work on this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's saying something if you're starting to enjoy it. And for you, as you kind of go into the solo artist realm and go down that, I know you've openly shared your philosophy is betting on oneself. So yeah. I mean, how are you kind of using that as you go into this role as a solo artist, or taking your own band?
Well, I think a lot of musicians that start out like I have as a career sideman musician, they push all their chips onto the artist they're playing with, or the opportunity that they can get. Like, oh man, this is going to employ me for X amount of years or whatever. And the bottom can drop out literally overnight. Like, I've seen it all. Like, an artist gets sick and cancels a whole tour, or they want to have a baby. And this is not about you, Lucy. I was talking. Somebody else I know was an artist that they decided to have a baby and blew the whole tour. So no, not about her at all. But sometimes an artist will just up and decide to take a break, and then you got to go looking for work. So I said, I'm going to try this solo thing, and now I'm a baby at it, which kind of is weird to be, doing this as long as I've been, but kind of being my own artist and doing a podcast talking about myself, as opposed to, being a side person for David Lee Murphy or whatever, which I got great experiences with. I mean, we played great tours with Kenny Chesney and stuff like that, and we had a freaking blast. It was awesome. But I knew that I could be a band leader, I could be an artist, and I said, you know what? It's now or never. So that's really what it came down to.
Well, and when you put out your first EP, Well Suited, I think that was back in 2016. So now,
Yeah.
almost a decade later, you're putting out another one. How has your approach to everything changed? Whether that's writing, arranging, or performing, how has that evolved?
That's a good question, because that batch of songs was just kind of like, I wanted to record something with my friend Sean before I moved away from Pittsburgh to Nashville, and have like a little musical business card. And some of those songs on that record we still play. It is not, you talk to anybody who writes songs, they're like, that's not really who I am now. No, it wasn't. Not like I was an infant when it comes to songwriting. Couple instrumental songs, couple vocal tunes, whatever. It was just something to kind of try. And then, this record is not too dissimilar, because it's like, let me dip a toe back in the water. I don't want to like put out a record that's completely like, okay, here's my entire soul that I'm bearing from you. I wanted to do this to kind of learn who I am as an artist, which I don't know yet. Like, I'm still a very freshly baked cake that's still actually in the oven. But the thing was, when I was doing those shows with Will Hogue, I said this to my wife, and I said this to my therapist, and I'm like, when I watch this guy He embodies himself. He plays guitar like himself. He sings like himself. He fronts the band and entertains like himself. And I was like, that's a guy who's been doing it for a while and has actualized himself as an artist. I've seen it with Lucy. I've seen it with David Lee. I've seen it with Joss Stone. Like, they are who they are. They're not trying to be anything other than that. And I think you have to grow to an acceptance. And I am morphing into that, but it's still going to take time.
I was going to say, I know, just doing the show for, 4 or 5 years now, I've learned that the amount of artists that say, boy, once I figured out who I wanted to be or how I wanted it to sound, like once I got to where I was like, oh, that's what I want to do, things changed, or it just, everything came into focus. And it's wild because you're like, isn't that how it works? But it's not, because like you said, you're still kind of learning everything there is that you want to do.
Really, really true, and that's kind of the part that's fun to know that it's going to keep happening. It's going to keep evolving. So I'm trying to not put too much pressure on myself to have like this amazing, 90-minute show or a 2-hour show. Like, it's all, silly putty that you just kind of like have to shape into something over time and then start over and try it again.
I was going to say, at some point, you'll get it how you want it, and then you want to change it all up.
Exactly.
Now, at the beginning, I'd love to ask what your go-to drink is, and I'm curious what your answer is going to be on this one, because I always love to ask this toward the end, because for you, with what you do and kind of how you're approaching things, it's not maybe the typical, hey, I've just put out a new album of 12 songs I've recorded. It's, you kind of have a deep catalog of what you could potentially pull out. So what's your favorite song to perform live right now, whether it's yours or a cover or something else?
Well, I like doing my tune, She's Like the Weather. I wrote that song a long time ago, probably 10 years ago, and just had it kicking around. I would play it at like guitar clinics I would do. Like, I used to do clinics for Martin Guitar and did plenty in Kentucky. And I would have to say, hey, I'm not a bluegrasser, but I'm going to do my thing. I hope you like it. And generally people did. And that song always kind of started. I like Keb Mo a lot in his songwriting and his storytelling, and they're always like these sort of charming, lyrical, endeavors that he does. And I started to write this song, She's Like the Weather, and people would like it, and they laugh, and they thought it was kind of charming. And I went to a friend of mine who is he's a great producer and musician, and he plays drums with Brothers Osborne. His name's Adam Box. And I went to Adam, and I was like, I think you're the guy that can help me make this like fun and quirky. And we just started playing around with some riffs and some ideas, and it really came to fruition. And when I play that song, I'm like, yeah, this is what I sound like,
I love that, and that leads perfectly into the next one. And you've talked about it. You've been working on writing songs, different things. So more new music of yours coming out at some point. What can you tell me? I don't want to get you in trouble,
No.
But what can you tell us and get
open
us
book here? Well, I have like I have a handful of songs sort of in like the 3/4 recorded stage, and then my band and I did this showcase sponsored by Ocean Way Studio here in Nashville, which is owned by Belmont University, and you play a showcase, and if you win, you get a free studio time at Ocean Way. So we have that coming to us, anytime we want, really. So I'm like writing for that, and it'll probably be another 6-song EP that we do. People say, why not 12? Why not 10? I'm like, because it's too expensive. Like, it's really expensive to record at the level that I want to record at, hiring really good people, and I mean, the mastering engineer alone is like not cheap, but I want a good one, and this guy's one of the best, and I love his work, and I'll find the budget for it. But 6 songs is cheaper than 10, and it's cheaper than 12. And I remember when John Mayer put out some music at one point, he only put out a few songs at a time, and he said that's as many songs as people can listen to on a treadmill. And I was like, ooh, that's really smart. They got about 20 minutes, and that's the attention span, and I've heard other people say that too. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. But got a bunch of new songs I'm excited about recording, and I think what I'll probably do is, that's tough to say, whether I'll put in 2 EPs out back to back or a couple singles then an EP. I haven't figured it out yet, but I look at releasing music, don't shoot me, but as the awful C word, content. And I was like, yeah, let's just get it out, make more, put it out, make more, put it out. And not because I'm trying to pacify Spotify, but because I'm saying there's stuff behind that work in the pipeline. You got to get that stuff out, demoed, recorded, mixed, mastered, boom, sent out. Like I just read this book on Prince, and there was a story from one of his engineers where he would record 3 songs a day. Now, if you say that in Nashville, they're like, well, we record 6, 10 songs in a day. No. He wrote, recorded, mixed, mastered 3 songs in a day. Like, I'm talking 24 hours, 20, so he was getting the stuff out because he knew there was more that would always be coming, I can't say that for sure, but it sure feels that way.
Well, and what's kind of fun with what you're doing, and finding the blues and going back into the 50s and 60s, if anyone knows anything about music, albums weren't a huge thing all the time back in the early beginnings. Right. There was a lot of singles.
Totally.
And it's kind of funny that's almost history's repeating itself in a sense.
And they didn't take a lot of time to do it. Like jazz records were done in a day. They'd stand around one mic, in the Blue Note era, and they'd play, a couple standards, maybe 4 or 5 songs. Everybody would solo. They would have 4 songs. The record would be 48 minutes long, because of how, improvised it was or whatever. So I think it's easy to forget that because we live in such a 3.5-minute pop world,
But like I said, I've enjoyed getting to listen to your interpretations on a good place to start. If you haven't, folks, give it a listen. But obviously we're got a little bit of time left in 2025. I don't want to fast forward too quick. So
yeah,
what else can folks expect from you in 2025, and then obviously on into 2026?
Well, it's kind of the thing where I start to kind of slow down on the performing. I perform mostly in Nashville these days until I can get. I put maybe another record out next year, and then it'll be like, hey, I got a lot of music. We can really put on a solid show and try to hit the touring thing a little bit if possible, which is a whole other conversation. But it's great because I can kind of pull it back a little bit, write, record, rehearse. I like to rehearse and play the songs I'm writing before I record them. I feel like the band gets a better, more confident feeling as opposed to coming in cold. And plus I don't have hours and hours of studio time to pay for that we can just screw around and create, So I usually kind of pull it back a little bit and do those things. But then I also really try to put a few more guitar lesson courses out to my subscribers. So that they have some stuff to look forward to during the holidays. People get time off, Thanksgiving, Christmas. They like to sit down and try to practice a little bit. So I like to give them new stuff. So the creative engine is never idling. That's for sure. Like I'm always pushing this. I'll always make videos. I'll always be doing a gig here or there. Yeah. So that's what I like to do once this time of the year comes around.
Well, I love it, and like I said, I've enjoyed getting to go down the rabbit hole of what you've been able to put out and make, and I can't wait to see what you've got next because it's a fun. What you're doing is something fun. It's creative, and it's
thanks,
something
man.
I think folks should give a listen to. And Corey, thanks for sharing a drink with me, man.
Oh man, my pleasure. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah, I'm gonna look into that bourbon.